So, who's in the lesson today?
It's only us, just me and you. Sorry.
Okay.
Nikita is sick. Yep.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yep.
So, have you been through this paper?
Yes, I have.
What did you think of it? How did you find it?
It actually went pretty well. I just wrote a lot. I don't know if I wrote too much, but just to be sure, because I understand, like, I don't state the stuff that are meant to give me the marks, but I understand I kind of skip over it. So I wrote as much as I could. Made sure I iterated everything.
Okay. So, we'll start to have a bit more of a think about technique and, how what the best way is to get those top marks on this kind of stuff, what the exams are really looking for. And then obviously if you have any questions on the actual theory, then we'll go through that as well. But I mean, basically, as you're starting to see, these questions are pretty standard, right? It's always going to be something about free trade, currencies, some macro kind of question, some numbers, and then the question is basically always the same. And then the essays here get a bit more interesting sometimes, although there's usually, the play it safe ones, pricey and elastic ones, kind of that kind of thing. Which question did you do for section B?
I did question 3.
Okay, cool. Let's start with section A though.
Just because I haven't done anything to describe price and elasticity and stuff as this kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay, good. Compare the US balance of trade with India in 2009 with that in 2014. What did you get?
Okay, I said that the US has a trade deficit in both of the years, both 2009 and 2014.
Okay.
And the 2004 trade deficit, it's increased in 2004 when compared with 2009.
Yeah.
Deficit has grown and increased, yeah.
Yeah. Trade to trade overall is clearly increased. There's more trade going on in everything. But yeah, they're also importing far more. Imports have doubled, more than doubled, whereas exports have only increased slightly. Okay. Let's have a look what the mark scheme here says. So US has deficit both years, and the deficit has grown. Exactly correct. So yeah, using the word deficit is very important. And other ways you can describe your negative trade balance, that kind of thing. But deficit is really the best way to describe that. Okay, now an explanation question. So explain 2 factors other than India's ban on US agriculture that could explain the change.
Okay, so I said one thing was fashion.
Okay.
So there's been a change in fashion, or I don't know how to put it, a change in fashion that caused the US consumers to change from US goods to Indian goods.
Okay.
So that would cause the change in the US balance of trade, because they would require more imports because they like Indian clothing more than, I guess, American ones.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So there's some kind of change in consumer tastes.
Yeah, and then so that would cause more imports. And then I said for decreased exports that the Indian government could have done some trade restrictions like a tariff that would make importing more expensive from the Indian side, reducing their exports.
But do we see a reduction in exports? Exports are up 50%, right?
Ah, okay.
So,
but could you say that it stopped them from increasing more?
Okay. Yeah, you could, if you're making it really clear that the deficit is increased because of the fact that India's, but it's basically a bit complicated, because what we see here is they're saying they explain the change of the US balance of trade that you have identified. Well, exports have increased massively by 50%. So to at the same time say, That would increase.
Can I just say that Indian production is more efficient, therefore they get, like, I guess, experience economies of scale, or because they experience economies of scale, so then it's cheaper.
Yeah, but not just it's cheaper; it's gotten even cheaper, and that's where we've seen this change.
Okay.
So the Indian economy, I know you could argue, is invested in lots of capital production, whatever, and this has meant that they're more efficient.
Improvement in like their production methods.
Yeah, it's got to be something dynamic. It's got to be something which they've improved at, changed. Okay, you've gone for two quite interesting examples. You haven't gone for the most obvious ones, like change in the value of the currency, or higher inflation, that kind of stuff. You've gone for the consumer taste one's really good, and then higher efficiency would drive lower prices there as well. You have to be a bit careful with efficiency, right? Because efficiency lowers the price of stuff, and if we're looking at the total value, then you could argue, if everything's much cheaper from India, then actually the value of total exports could go down. But that's assuming that there's a very inelastic demand for Indian goods, and they only want so many. And if the price then goes down, then the total value will go down. Do you see the logic there?
Yeah, I do.
But you're arguing that because of consumer taste and stuff, demand's increased massively. Okay. And then it's an explain question, isn't it? So yeah, it's all about, as you've done, making a point and then explaining how it would cause that effect, which you did twice quite well. Okay, yeah, so decline in the exchange rate. Taste, yep. Improvement in efficiency. So yeah, you see it's an improvement in the efficiency.
Yeah, not only the efficiency, okay. That's what increases the growth thing.
Yeah. And okay, yeah, so they're willing to accept what you were saying, position on tariffs and US goods by the Indian government.
You have to be careful. I have to be careful when
it's all about being really clear about the numbers there. That's really good. And yeah, so 1 mark for identifying it and 1 mark for explaining it, which is exactly what you did. This is China and not accepted. Okay, cool. In addition to the balance of trade in goods, what other balances would you require to calculate the US current account balance with India? Okay.
You would need 3 things: the balance on the services, balance on income, and balance on, I think, current transfers. I'm not sure about the third one, but I know you have to have 3.
Yep, sounds very good. And is it, yes, these are just listing them out, just the points. Balance of income, current transfers, and services. And you only need 2 of them, so yeah, you could easily get the marks there. Okay, if you know there's 3, obviously put them all down.
Yeah.
And you get all the marks there. Cool. Use a diagram to show how an import duty on a product affects its price. Okay. What kind of diagram did you draw for that?
The normal demand and supply, and then a shift in the supply curve to the left.
Like that?
Yeah. And then so then wherever there's the 2 difference in the prices where they intersect, yeah.
Price goes up?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's pick this diagram apart a bit. What would this diagram look like if you wanted to separate world supply from domestic supply?
I wanted to separate world demand from domestic.
No, not world demand. So,
well, could you please repeat? I kind of lost you.
So we're going to draw a new demand and supply diagram, which we're going to use specifically for tariffs and duties and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So we've got our downward sloping demand curve, and you may have seen a diagram like this before.
Yeah.
And we've got our upward sloping domestic supply curve. Okay, so now we're going to split up. Do you know what I mean by domestic and world?
Yeah.
And supply, and then domestic, and we'll just have normal demand. And in autarky, when there's no trade with other countries, then you're just going to have your free market price there, and now, if you make a number of assumptions, then you can add in a world supply, which is imported supply from
Horizontal.
the rest of the world. Sorry?
That's usually horizontal, right? Well,
Yeah, it's horizontal.
theoretically.
Why would it be horizontal?
Just because it's a fixed kind of a price when you're taking the world average thing, and
Yeah. The
quantity
argument is
not
that
really,
our economy on the own can't really affect world supply. So this is just the price of, I don't know, washing machines on the world market. And then we have a whole market operating like this. And so you've done diagrams like this before, or you just see?
Yeah, for multiple choice.
Okay, cool. So what is the total quantity consumed in this market?
Where the red line intersects with the demand curve.
Okay, very good. We'll call this supply world. That would be down here.
Yeah.
And then the price is obviously right here. Okay, how much of this is produced domestically?
Where the red line intersects with the supply curve, the left side of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
From that to 0.
So that's how much is produced domestically, and this much is produced by the world. Okay, now let's say we put a tariff or a duty on imports. What happens?
The world curve should go up.
Yeah. So let's say it moves up to here. We have this new world supply, so we see that domestic producers produce more. Less is produced by the world. Prices are highest for consumers, and consumers just get less overall. There's only this much which consumers get. So there's a fall in consumer surplus, right?
Yeah.
Could you illustrate that for me? What would that look like on this diagram?
So it would be from on which, the left one or the right?
This diagram here.
Okay. So the first one the fall would be the yellow line, where it's kind of like a trapezium. The yellow line, the bottom is the red, and then the two. One of them is the price axis, and then the demand on the right.
So starting like this.
Yep. Carries on.
This is what they lose.
Yeah, and then that stops there. Yeah.
Okay, very good. How much of that is gained by producers?
How much of it is gained by producers?
Because producers gain, right? If they sell more of their goods.
Yeah. The gain would be to the right of it, I think. I'm not so sure. Honestly, I'm not so sure.
Okay, what is producer surplus in the beginning?
Producer surplus in the beginning is from bottom to... Oh, they would gain that inside trapezium thing.
Yeah. So
right side of the... Okay.
This is them in the beginning. This is their surplus in the beginning, right? Agreed?
Yep.
Oh, now these lines are all a bit incorrect because I moved that. That one's still fine. Okay, cool. I'll just move this one down a little bit.
It'll be that inside trapezium here.
Okay. And yeah, so now the new surplus is they've gained this, haven't they?
Yeah, that inside trapezium.
How much tax revenue does the government make?
The government gets that increase in the price times by that quantity. So between the two yellow lines, that would be your quantity, and then
This box here?
line. Yeah, and throughout the bottom.
This bit.
No. Sorry. Yeah, that top tiny box. Sorry.
This little box here is the tax revenue.
Yep. That's tax revenue.
So, what is deadweight social welfare loss?
Then it would be those two triangles next to the tax revenue, I think.
Beautiful, yeah. These little triangles tell us.
What did you call it?
Deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss. Okay.
Yeah.
Deadweight loss.
Deadweight welfare loss. Okay.
Yeah.
And so who benefits and who loses out from tariffs?
The domestic suppliers would benefit.
Mhm.
Government would benefit.
Yep.
The world suppliers, the exporters would take a loss, and
Yep.
well, not take a loss, but they would lose out, and as well as the consumers, the domestic consumers.
Why? Because they face high prices, right?
Yeah. And
Okay.
if you take it far enough, I guess you could say the rest of the world consumers.
Do they benefit or not benefit?
They would benefit because now they supply less, so theoretically they would have it at a lower price.
Theoretically, right? But also, if we're drawing these supply worlds as flat anyway,
Okay.
then the same assumptions we're going to making those flat would mean that the world is not really affected by it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. And this is a much better diagram. If you want to make it clear what you're talking about, how an import duty on a product affects its price. Because by splitting up domestic and the world market, you can it's a bit clearer for you to do analysis and stuff. Especially once you get to here, right? Then you can if you draw. Did you draw it for this question here?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, then you can make it clear who's benefiting and who's not.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's see here. Macro diagram. The one supply is showing shifts left in the supply curve results in indirect actions. Also kept a diagram that shows the world supply. Okay, so either is fine. Perfect. Cool. So, what is likely to determine the extent of the change in sales when an import duty is imposed on US cars in China? Okay.
I said the price elasticity of demand. The fall in sales will be greater if the price elasticity of demand is larger than 1, and
Yep.
Less if the price elasticity of demand is less than 1. And
Very
in
good.
brackets, I put inelastic and elastic. So elastic
Yep,
and inelastic respectively. Yeah.
Yep. For clear recognition, depends the price of supply, 1 mark. For sales will be greater if the price elasticity of demand is high. Yep. You've gone a step further and given it in both situations. Cool. Explain a possible reason why China imposed export quotas on tungsten and what is that? Molybdenum.
Okay. I said 1 to preserve scarce resources in the country.
Okay.
As this makes it since the exporters are run by the profit motive, it makes it less profitable. So the government hopes that they would go about and use other resources rather than exporting tungsten and that other weird one. And then the other I put another reason just in case, and I put to increase the government revenue from the imposed export quotas.
Yeah, because the Chinese government earns a lot of money from that, right? Considering they're so required in the US. Let's have a look. Raise the export price, and as a result, raw material costs for the production of a range of American goods rise, giving an advantage to Chinese producers of these goods. Do you understand the argument behind this?
Would you, as a result, raw material costs? Yep.
Yeah, so that's quite like a dark one to say, oh, China's doing it so that they seem more competitive, helping their own firms. Preserve declining scarce resources, supply for domestic producers, smash that. Increase revenue from exports due to the increase in price, and to reduce production because of environmental. 2 marks there. You explained the effect and then why it would work.
Yeah.
C. Consider whether the protectionist measures adopted by countries such as India, China, and Argentina with the US could ever be justified. What did you say?
Okay. So I said against protectionism, I'm just going to list all of them. There's dangers of retaliation from the protectionism to the opposing country. I guess I don't know how to word it properly.
Yeah.
But there's dangers of retaliation. So it might end up being more harmful than beneficial.
Yeah.
That's one. Two, you might end up with trade wars where other producers might start dumping.
Okay. So when we talk about trade wars, do you know what I mean when we talk about trade wars?
I'm not entirely sure. I presumed it would be dumping and things, but
so trade war isn't instigated by companies. When we talk about trade wars, we're usually talking about
sorry.
you raising tariffs and then
the quotas and the tariffs and things, right? Sorry.
Yeah, that comes under trade wars.
Yeah. No. I was going.
So it's when countries as opposed to their companies. Sorry.
I read that wrong. That was meant to be in favor of protectionism to prevent people dumping.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, apologies. I kind of never structured my thing right. Even confused myself. There's those two, and then there might be a comparative advantage where it's beneficial for both countries to trade.
What's the assumption behind comparative advantage for it to work?
That there's very low or no transport costs.
Yeah, that's one good assumption. What else are we assuming?
I don't know. What else would there be? They make the exact same thing like.
Does it make a difference if my PPF looks like this versus like this?
Yeah, it does make a difference.
Why?
Because then, then it's not necessarily a different. It's.
Would you want to?
There's no like constant ratio between the two. The comparative advantage to be calculated.
Okay, so yeah, it becomes harder to calculate comparative advantage, but it should still work, right? Would on the straight line, is it beneficial for me to specialize over there? Yes. Yeah. But is it beneficial for me to specialize over there if my PPF looks like that?
No.
Why not?
Because it's like then you'd lose a lot more good X for just a few more of good Y.
Yeah, I could be producing over there just almost the same amount and make loads of it myself, right?
Yeah.
So how do we describe that assumption? What assumption is that we make when we're doing our comparative advantage?
I don't know. I honestly don't know what the name is called.
Perfect factor mobility.
Oh, okay. I know about. I don't know what it was called. Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, perfect factor mobility. That makes sense for why it's like that, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Good, cool. And then there's one other important assumption for all of comparative advantage to work. Let's see if we covered it here. No, I don't think we got into the. No, okay. Would both countries benefit if one country specialized in apples and the other country specialized in cars, but it cost 1 million apples per car? Would both countries benefit?
Nope.
So one of them.
So it's assumption that both of them benefit or something.
I mean, if you assume that both of them benefit, then it's not much point having the whole theory of comparative advantage. The assumption is that.
Yeah, true.
But comparative advantage to work, the countries have to have different opportunity costs. Remember that?
Yeah. Remember that. Okay.
So one, they have different opportunity costs. But two, the exchange ratio, so for apples and cars, must lie between the two costs. Okay?
Yeah.
And you can do some really pretty maths. It's not very complicated. If you just sit down and use some tables, then you can very, very quickly see that for both countries to benefit, the exchange rate between cars and apples have to be between the two opportunity costs. Yeah.
I've done this, but I haven't really thought about it and put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lot of fun to do that. Okay, cool. Any other pros and cons?
So prevent dumping is a pro, comparative advantage, and to avoid trade wars.
How would that work?
Okay, that's not really a good pro, would it be? Because I already wrote that in cons. So a con would be a pro would be, kind of all over the place, to protect infant industries.
Okay.
So it allows them to experience economies of scale. It protects them until they can experience economies of scale.
Yeah.
And then a con for that would be they're not efficient enough. They'll just always use the inefficient production methods.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wrote.
Okay, very good. Are there any reasons why the US doesn't allow North Korea to create all the world's nukes because they have a comparative advantage in it?
Relationships, like the trust between them.
Yeah, I mean, all this trade.
Oh, independence.
Yeah. So there's you could argue is this interdependence, right?
Yeah. So that the main things are dependent. Like you don't always try to get electricity from somewhere else, because then if it stops supplying, then you kind of.
Yeah, you're a big shop. So especially for things which are of strategic national interest, it's really important that you can provide your own in case something goes wrong, right? And that's why everyone has their own army and stuff rather than outsourcing all of that to whoever can do that the cheapest. Okay, yeah, very good. You had lots of good points there. Did you just do a bunch of these in your essay?
Yeah. I just came up with the trade wars right now after realizing. But I did like about, I think, 3 or 4 of them.
Okay. And it's a consider question. Okay. Cool. So, arguments in favor of protectionism, infant industry argument, anti-dumping. So one argument well explained could be awarded 3 marks. And then against protectionism, comparative advantage, dangerous retaliation, trade wars.
So could you have like one for the 3 marks? Could you have one that's kind of listed but not so well explained, but the other one for like 2 marks or something? Would that work out? Because I wrote 2 for one and then 3 for the other.
So you can actually get up to 3 marks for any of the ones which you put down.
Okay.
So
but you could have like 2 and a 1, right?
Yeah, you could have 1, 1, 1, or 2 and 1, or 3 and 0, 0, whatever you wanted, up to a maximum of 3 for 4, maximum of 3 against.
Okay.
And then a maximum of 5 in total for those, because you have to do a conclusion. What did you conclude?
Oh, I did not do a conclusion.
Okay. So yeah, it's consider whether it could ever be justified. So the conclusion doesn't have to be long, but what do you think? What do you think you would conclude?
It can be justified. So I don't know how else I would conclude it. Like saying that. Could you give me an example, please? Of how it can be?
So for these Part C questions, almost all of the time you need a single concluding sentence or 1 or 2 sentences, really short at the end to get that last mark. And it's the way that I structure them is simply saying something like, in conclusion, protectionist measures can, in certain circumstances, be justified.
Okay.
Because this kind of question is quite easy, right? Because what it's saying is if there's one instance in the whole world that a protectionist measure can be justified, then this question is proven correct, right?
Yeah.
Could ever be justified. So if you just say, there's sufficient evidence because of this, countries such as India can justify their protectionist measures.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Happy with all of this stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting as well, wasn't it, about this whole World Trade Organization. It's got a lot of power. It's a very, very powerful group.
Yeah.
Big fans.
I'm actually kind of surprised how little it required us to like refer back to the text compared to the other ones.
Yes, this is true. I guess they gave you options too, but most of it was your own thinking, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Good. I feel like you're very strong on this theory stuff now after you've done it a couple of times.
Thanks to you.
And just remember you've got your comparative advantage theory, which is so powerful, and you just need to understand the assumptions behind it.
Yep. Got that.
Okay, fantastic. So you did question 3, right? Explaining 2 factors that cause the supply of a product to be price inelastic. Okay. And it's about supply of a product. I can already see hundreds of people plowing into this question, talking about demand anyway. Discuss the policies that a government might adopt to increase the price elasticity of supply of agricultural goods in the economy, and consider which policy is less likely to be most effective. Okay, tell me about your thinking for part A.
So for part A, I said the meaning of price elasticity of supply and what inelastic means.
Yep.
So should I explain that, or should I just skip over it?
Well, just tell me the structure. This is quite good. So,
okay, so I defined the price elasticity of supply, and said it's inelastic when it's less than 1, and then I gave the formula.
Yep.
Which is percentage change in quantity of percentage change in supply. It's quantity supplied of a percentage change in price.
Very good. How did you define price elasticity of supply?
It is it's the responsiveness of the suppliers following. It's the degree of responsiveness of suppliers following a change in price.
Very good.
Yeah, and then that's what I did. And then the next one was then I explained how the percentage change in quantity supplied is less than percentage change in price, then it's less than 1. That's an elastic, and the other way it's elastic. And then the two factors I had was the availability of stocks.
Okay.
And
how does that affect PES?
So basically, or like the shelf life of the product, so how well they can keep like extra storage. So that affects and could make it price inelastic, because something like Coke can be stored, a lot of it can be stored, and the shelf life is very long.
Okay.
So when there's an increase in price, they can just sell all that stock, whereas something like that's I forgot the word. I don't even write it down. Something that's degradable, I think. I'm trying to think of. This was perishable, I think.
Perishable, yeah, absolutely right.
Yep. That's the word I was trying to look for when I was writing. But that is a product like that is price inelastic, because you can't really keep it in the stocks. Stocks are going to be very low. And then the second one was the time period required to make it. So like the time it takes for production. For example, wheat would take a lot of time to produce, whereas a Coke can is very little. So that makes the price inelastic.
Okay, very good. Yeah, these sound like very good arguments. So did you give concrete examples in your essay? Did you mention any actual products?
I used Coke and wheat, and then Coke and cake.
Okay. Coke, of course. What determines the price of Coke?
What do you mean? What determines the price? Like the other competitions, and then.
Yeah, I mean, the price of Coke is determined by Coca-Cola, right?
Yeah.
So it's probably not the best good when you're talking about price elasticity of supply, because they set the price themselves.
Okay.
Something like wheat might be better. Did you use wheat as your perishable example, or?
Yes, as perishable, and as the one where it takes long to grow.
Okay. So Wheat, of course, no one buys wheat. People buy flour, right?
Yeah.
Which is ground up wheat, which lasts forever, basically.
Oh, sorry, for my perishable thing, I had cake.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, the perishable argument's good. I wouldn't. Yes, I'll just stray away from picking a good, which is the price is set literally by the company.
Which one would you give as a good alternative?
Okay, so something which has a long shelf life. You could go further. So you could say, for example, drinks, or
okay, so just a generic thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's so generic rather than naming one specific product.
Okay.
You could say, I don't know, cola, because then that's and that's also includes things like Pepsi Cola. But I don't know. I just say either something like drinks, or
soft drinks,
canned fruits. Like canned fruits, they last forever, right?
Okay.
Tinned vegetables, whatever you want. And then compare it to something very perishable, such as fresh fruit, or cakes, as you said. If you did tinned fruit versus fresh, something like that.
Okay. Understood.
And okay, so your argument is companies hold back stock until the price rises, and then they can suddenly sell stuff, but only companies which are dealing in non-perishable goods.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then your second argument is saying, well, also we have to factor in the time it takes to grow, because if there's some change in price, but it takes 2 years for you to grow more wheat, compared to much quicker to make a Coke can. Okay. Yeah. I think your examples work really well for the second part of the question. Okay. What can you think of any other things which affect it?
In terms of factors, how quick it is, like factor mobility in terms of moving from, let's say, if they're trying to produce, let's say, a printing press, they can really move quickly from like brochures to posters or something.
Yeah. So
yes. Whereas if you're trying to grow from
the factors, how mobile the factors are. Let's say the price rises, for agricultural products. What's really going to change supply the most is going to be new entrants coming into the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what discourages new entrants from coming into the market and increasing supply?
The barriers of entry. So you would have maybe high capitals required in terms of buying the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Barriers, expensive capital. Labor is not perfectly mobile, and it's difficult to get people who know how to farm this stuff. All that kind of thing. What about barriers to exit? Would that affect PES?
I actually haven't heard of barriers to exit.
Okay, so barriers to exit are, as you can probably imagine, how easy it is to leave an industry. Can you easily sell off all your machinery? Are there lots of people who want to buy it? Or have the barriers to exit once you're an established oil firm or like, for example, if you're a nuclear power plant operator, you can't just leave the market. No, you've got to shut down your whole nuclear power plant, massive costs to do with that kind of stuff. They're barriers to exit.
Yeah.
How would they affect PES?
If the barriers of exit are really high, then the supply is more price elastic. Because there's more.
Why do you think so?
Because there's more producers wherever. Well, it depends on which barriers to exit. Sorry, if it's for other products, then PES will be more inelastic. Whereas if it's for this very product, then it's going to be more price elastic.
Okay, so you're telling me that if the price falls for a product, it's more elastic, so loads of people leave the market.
Oh, that way. Okay.
You can think about it both ways, right? Price elasticity is about upward price movements and downward movements.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking if it goes up, because people wouldn't be able to leave, they'll just stay and put more effort into it. I don't think about when it leaves. Makes sense now.
So what do you think this would be the shape of a supply curve in an industry that had loads of barriers to exit, like nuclear power plant operators?
It would be
Inelastic?
pretty inelastic.
Pretty inelastic?
Yeah.
For both upward price movements and downward price movements, right? Because you could say it's pretty inelastic down, but more elastic above, right? See that?
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think it would be like this, or do you think it would be or do you think it would be inelastic for the above the price as well, if the price increases? If you were an entrepreneur and you knew that the price of wheat goes up and down and up and down, and there are massive barriers to entry in this market, massive barriers to exit in this market, would you be really willing to plow into the market if it was going to go up for a bit?
When it goes up, it's at a higher price. It's more likely to be elastic, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that, but obviously, having barriers to exit is a barrier to entry, because if things go wrong and your company's not working, the market collapse.
Okay, yeah.
If it's really expensive to curtail down and to stop selling it, that's a barrier to entry. That might be actually, you know what, I'm not going to risk entering this market. It'll cost me millions if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So you can argue it's more elastic above the price if the price rises, but probably not that much more. It's probably still reasonably inelastic above the price. Okay?
Yeah.
Cool. And yet, so have you seen the kinked oligopoly demand curve diagram?
I have not, no.
Okay, if you like how these curves shift like that and are like little kinks, then you'll like the oligopoly diagram as well. But I think you'll be learning about that later. Okay, cool. I think that's more A2 stuff. Fine. Let's see what the mark scheme says. For knowledge and understanding, accurate formula, you got that. Clear understanding, percentage changing. Yeah, you got the percentage change. For application with explanation 2, shortest of factory production, nature of the product, time period under consideration, availability of stocks. That sounds really good. Okay, happy with that?
Yep.
Cool. Now, part B, obviously the more interesting one. Discuss the policies that a government might adopt to increase the PES of agricultural goods in an economy. Okay, what did you think? What are the policies that we could do?
So to increase PES, I said increase the supply of, include, like, get more training schemes. So
Okay.
Supply, that would be a supply side policy, to increase expenditure on education to get more training schemes, which in turn increases the supply of skilled labor, which reduces barriers to entry because there's more people available. If you want to start a company, you can hire a lot of people more easily, allowing price elasticity, so for it to become more elastic.
Yeah, sounds good.
A reduction in, like, the tax rates for that producers of that certain good.
How would that help?
That will increase incentives to produce that.
Which tax rate? Sorry, tax rate as in corporate tax or tariffs?
Corporate tax. Corporate tax.
Okay.
To firms that are producing a certain product.
Yeah.
That also motivates them to, increases the incentive to produce that certain product. More producers in the market, high elasticity. That's the supply side of things. You could also say a lower interest rate.
Why would more produced in the market increase PES?
Because let's say two producers, one producer can increase by 5% and the other by another. Whoops. Okay. Because then that kind of production is, how do I put it? But it kind of like adds up. I'm not sure how to put it.
Okay, adds up. What's going on? Is it frozen? I'll refresh it.
Logged you in as two people. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to explain that, thinking about it.
Okay, so
But yeah, okay, so that's that side of it. And then the other ones would be reduced import controls on the products that are needed to start that are needed to produce that certain good or service, or what do you want to call it. So that would be something like maybe tractors are cheaper,
yep.
so there wouldn't be tariffs on tractors and things. There might be subsidies, which I don't really know how to explain because that's the same as like tax reductions.
So import controls both on the machinery which is used to make the agro products and also the product.
No, for that you would have to increase
Okay.
because because if you reduce it, then wouldn't you get like outside competition, and then they would be less likely to produce more?
Is it specifically talking about domestic production
Um,
in an economy? Yeah.
oh,
Okay. So yeah, it is talking about domestic.
it is domestic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So could you please explain that reduction in corporate tax? How would I explain that? So there's more producers, and how would that lead to?
Okay. You're on the right. You're on the right lines. More producers in any industry basically mean that the industry is more elastic.
So far with you.
Because if there's a, it always helps to look at the extreme edge cases, right? If we're looking at a monopoly, for example, if there's a rise in price because there's a rise in demand, often the monopoly will just keep quantity exactly where it is, and then just take that extra rise in demand as more profit by raising the price a little bit. In a more competitive market where there's loads and loads of firms, if there's a rise in price for whatever reason, none of the firms have any market power. So all of that rise in price is translated into more firms entering the market to remove that abnormal profit. Understand?
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So because demand curve is completely flat for a firm in a competitive market, we see any rise in price leading to complete increase in supply rather than also leading to some increase in the price. Okay.
Yep.
And so the more firms there are, and you can go about that by saying, if each firm can increase its supply by 10%, then the overall increase in supply will be more than if it were one firm. That kind of thing. Also, if there's a fall in price, if there's loads and loads of firms in the market, then it's easier for some to leave rather if there's just one monopolizing firm. Then supply's going to change more basically if there's loads of firms in the.
And then at the end of each thing, I had some sort of evaluative.
Okay, very good. What kind of eval did you get for the more training schemes?
So I just had training schemes as the highest. That's the most effective.
Okay.
Because that's the most likely to impact barriers to entry and exit.
Yep, very good.
And then
so labor more mobile reduces barriers to entry and exit.
That was my most effective one.
Okay.
Then I said I didn't really say.
Did you evaluate it in a negative light at all, or did you just say positive?
I just put that as the most positive one.
Okay, so evaluation.
Yep.
if you want to be getting top evaluation, then it's yes saying okay. I think what you're saying is more the concluding bit, where right at the bottom you say actually because of this, training schemes are the best. Evaluation is all about saying yes, but is this really true? Is this going to work? The fors and the against. You're not just picking this as your favorite one, okay? So you say it's the most effective, but why is it the most effective? And what are some caveats to that thinking for training schemes, for example?
So training schemes, you could have opportunity cost.
Yeah, I mean the government's paying for this, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Could be expensive. What else about a training scheme? How long does a training scheme take?
They take very long, like in terms of, so it's not really,
Effect,
there's no immediate effect. Yeah. And it could cause a rise in unemployment.
Why?
Because it might attract more people. It might make more people in the working age out going into the labor force, but then now that they're trained, they can't use those skills anywhere else.
Okay. Yep.
So
this training course is training in agriculture.
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say is like maybe they never considered joining the labor force, but then they're of working age, but they never joined the labor force. But then now because of the scheme, they said, okay, fine, then we join the labor force, but now they don't have jobs. So technically, that would be a rise in unemployment.
Okay, rise in unemployment if people enter the labor force. Okay, I mean, you can argue it. But these people are now highly trained in agriculture and stuff.
So too complicated?
Yeah, I think it's a bit too contrived.
Okay.
But I mean, if you got time, then it's obviously an interesting way to look at what could be some of the other effects. Okay, how realistic is it that thousands of people who already have jobs, right? These people already have jobs, and then the government comes along and says, you know what, you can all go on this farming training program. Do you think a lot of people are going to be signing up for this?
No.
Right. So how are you going to encourage people to sign up for this? Are you going to pay them a lot of money if they complete it, or how's that going to work? It's not the most glamorous industry in the world, right? Agricultural.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's something to be considered as well. And are people interested really? But maybe for unemployed people or if people don't really know much about it, yeah, I mean certainly. Okay, cool. And that's what real evaluation is. So it's really going into it and saying, okay, it's going to make labor more mobile, which is going to have other benefits, but it could also cause a rise in unemployment if these people enter the labor force and still can't find jobs. But is that really a bad thing? Because I mean, is it a rise in unemployment actually as the country actually changed states? Nothing's actually changed in the economy, right? If people define themselves as not in the labor force versus if people define themselves as unemployed, like statistics change, but
not really.
Things haven't actually changed, right? And then you could look at it. It's expensive. How long will it take to work? Are people even interested? This kind of stuff. That's evaluation. And then it's the conclusion at the end when you say, given all the evaluation I've done, I think that this one is the best one and this one is the worst one. Okay.
Okay.
Cool. So, sorry.
It's kind of like a discuss question.
Yeah, evaluation is all about discussion. It's you've made a statement. So you've analyzed some economics, and then you're evaluating how true is that analysis that you've done.
Yep.
So how true is the analysis that you've done that a reduction in corporate tax on industry would mean more producers, and that would mean more PES?
That would be true. But then
the best kind of evaluation is you make usually some detached economic point, like saying training schemes, and then you apply it to the exact industry you're talking about here, and you're saying, actually, you know, this would work especially well or not very well at all in the agricultural industry.
Ah, okay. So could I say something like, so if you have corporate tax, then this reduction in corporate tax, it could become some sort of like a monopoly to a certain extent. Would that really make sense?
Why?
Because then they will start making more profit. The already
Is that what a
existing
monopoly
companies.
is?
Well, then they could artificially create more barriers to entry, couldn't they?
Okay, so current producers are richer because of reductions in corporate tax, which they invest into making the industry less competitive by increasing barriers to entry.
Yeah.
Is that your argument?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a good argument, but I would say it's a bit contrived. Okay, it's
Okay.
relying on the assumption that these producers are able to create barriers of entry. How would you do that in agriculture?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, so
Unless you like,
let's think of something
yeah.
that really would work in agriculture, a reduction in corporate tax rate on the industry. How does corporate tax work at the moment? Any idea?
What do you mean by at the moment?
What is the corporate tax rate?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
So what is the UK corporate tax rate? Do you know?
I do not know, sorry.
Okay, I think it's 17%. Let me just check. The UK corporate tax rate. Oh, okay, it's 20% at the moment, and that's falling to 19%. Okay.
Okay.
So how much difference will it make a reduction in corporate tax on industry? Do you think that?
I don't think it'll make that much of a difference.
Okay.
Mainly because when you get like that kind of like a tiny change in that corporate tax, that few hundred or that few £1,000 won't really push the entrepreneur past that point to start the company.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the farmers at the moment might be more willing to work in that industry, and they're going to be earning more money, certainly. And you know, we might see a couple of people who are like, okay, you know what, I'm paying 20% in the fishing industry, but I only have to pay 17% or 15% in the farming industry, so they can move. But it might not cause massive increases in the number of producers in the market, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, there are some pros to it as well, right? Reduction in corporate tax, it could mean more investment from other countries if corporate tax in agriculture is higher there. Yeah. And it's also, what's another negative of it? Another problem with reducing the corporate tax rate?
Reduce tax revenue.
Yeah, reduce tax revenue. Okay, very good. Reduced import controls. How would that work? What is the analysis and what is the eval?
So reduced import controls, that would mean, well, negatives to it, worse balance of trade.
Yep.
The increased deficit.
Yep.
Positive, well, and another negative would be it would hinder the domestic producers of that certain product.
Yep.
The benefit of it is that it is quite it's a shorter term effect. It's like a lot more immediate compared to like training schemes.
Yeah. How expensive is it?
It's, I don't know, it depends on the import controls, but the government still loses a lot of tax revenue.
Okay, cool. And then you're sitting down and then you're concluding that.
Concluding that maybe the turning schemes are the most effective
Okay.
thing for in terms of agriculture at this stage.
Yeah. Training schemes most effective. And because basically the others are you're kind of distorting the market a little bit. You're saying, I'm going to make this more elastic to supply by having it have a lower tax rate than the rest of the market, or by making it have lower import controls than the rest of the market. So it's kind of, you're creating market distortions in the sense that suddenly the agricultural industry is different from the rest of the other industries, and a lot of people would find that very unfair. Why are farmers, wealthy landowners being charged only 18% when us hardworking plumbers are paying 20% corporate tax? Okay. Whereas training schemes, they're non-distortionary, and any training you give people is just going to make them more productive.
Yeah.
Right. So you could actually mean that more agricultural produce is created, not just an increase in price elasticity of supply. Okay. I like it. Let's have a look. At least 2 policies. So you did 3. That's good. Reduced import controls, subsidies, training schemes, tax reductions. Okay.
Oh, we didn't talk about subsidies.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay, should have talked about that.
Subsidies work in the same way as reductions in corporate tax.
Corporate tax, yeah.
Identification of the policy and 3 marks explaining how it increase. For evaluative comment on the effectiveness of the policies explained, a concluding comment like to use for 4 marks. Okay, so basically it looks to be 1 mark for each of the evaluation that you do, and then a final mark for a concluding comment. Okay.
Yep.
So evaluative comment on the effectiveness of the policies explained, that's really looking at it and saying, would this work in agriculture? Is it expensive? Is it not expensive? How long the time lag? All that kind of stuff. Okay.
Yep. That's also good.
Awesome. So which of the other 2 questions would you be interested in doing?
Probably 4.
Okay.
Just because how forming demerit, and we've done that merit and demerit stuff, and it's not really price elastic or inelastic things.
Yeah. Have you learned about money?
Only GCSE levels. Like most of the things I've done is only through multiple choice. I haven't really sat down and gone through the textbook for theory.
Okay, cool. Then we'll have a look at money. Money is really interesting. Some of them the purposes.
Yep.
Okay. Do you know what the functions of money are? You probably did that.
Yeah. So it's a store of value, standard of deferred payment. I think it's a unit of value, and then I forgot what the 4th one is. Some sort of exchange or something. Sorry, I don't know the 4th one.
So what did you say? Store of value. What else did you get?
Standard of deferred payment.
Yep.
And then unit of value. Yeah, medium of exchange and unit of value or something. That's the one.
Unit of account.
Oh, unit of account. Okay.
Tell me about medium of exchange.
That is, I don't know how to define it, but it's what allows the trade of a good with a product. So it takes it away from the barter system.
Yeah. And what's the problem with the barter system?
You need double coincidence of wants, and some products are not able to be not really divisible. Like you can't take half a cow. Very good.
And medium of exchange, having money gets rid of that problem, solves it, and you can have half a pound
Yep, it has divisibility.
Okay. Store of value.
That is when you can save it, like save the money. Like say for instance, it's not perishable.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
fruits will lose their value over time, whereas money won't.
Okay. And is that strictly true?
No, because of inflation. So the real value will decrease.
Yep. But inflation is usually, hopefully, reasonably low. So it still acts as a relatively good store of value, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What other
kind of
stores of
why I have
value,
interest.
right? Because I mean, money's not unique in being a store of value.
Yeah, but pardon, what did you say? What was
What
the
else could we
question?
use than money as a store of value?
Something like gold. Gold is usually used.
Yeah, that's a good store of
as
value.
value.
I mean, any like even land, like houses, works
Yeah.
of art.
Some other one is like usually stocks, like shares. Sorry.
Okay. They could act as a store of value, but that's usually not
Sorry.
their primary function.
Government bonds or something.
Yeah, government bonds, let's say, are a better example. They're a good store of value. Okay. Why am I saying that bonds might be better than stocks as a store of value?
Because the stocks depend on like the company, whereas a bond will be paid by the government. It's backed by the government.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a fixed amount, which you know exactly how much it's going to be, which means you can store value in it rather than it jumping up. What about unit of account?
So that is to find like the value of a product. Say for instance, mangoes are $3. You can put like you can give it how much it's worth, kind of thing. Like you have a unit to compare. Like rather than saying a cow is worth 4 mangoes, and then you have that one specific thing that's universal.
Yeah, it's a common measure of value, right?
Yeah.
And it means you're able to make decisions, suppliers and buyers are able to make decisions about how many to supply, how much to purchase it for, is this a good price, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the last one, standard deferred payment, what's that about?
That's basically like the credit system. So this product is this much now, you can come and pay back later this much value. Well,
okay,
this
very
much money,
good.
sorry.
Because credit is very important in capitalism, isn't it? Wonderful. So the exact question says, explain what is used. If this is all GCSE stuff, then basically it's just building on that. It doesn't go much deeper than what you've said. Explain what is used as money in a modern economy and how an increase in the quantity of money can cause prices to rise. Okay. Have you heard of the monetarist theories of money?
No.
Have you heard of monetarism?
No. I've heard of monetary policy, but not monetarism.
Ah, okay. Oh, that's not working very well. So the monetarist theories of money are basically Milton Friedman. He's a big proponent for these theories. Have you heard of him?
No.
Okay, yeah. So Milton Friedman's a very famous economist. I think he's been awarded a Nobel Prize for some of his work, and he is a monetarist, just like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher have often been described as monetarists as well. And that means he's very against inflation.
Mm-hmm.
So wants inflation to be controlled and kept as low as possible.
Yep.
And this should be done by minimizing the increase in the money supply. So he came out with this equation, which is MV equals PY. Have you ever seen this before?
I have not, no.
Okay, so he looked at how the world is functioning, especially he's a US based economist, and he said that this equation describes how it all works. Okay, so M is money supply in the economy. Okay.
Okay.
What is money supply?
The amount of money in the economy.
Okay, is that easy to work out?
Um, it should be because in theory, the central bank orders the printing, so it should know how much is being printed.
Yeah, so for example, here in the UK, they got rid of all the old £5 notes, and now they've got the new ones. They know exactly how many they printed, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you include, what about money in people's bank accounts?
That would not be money supply, would it?
That
No, it
not?
would be. It would be. It would be. It would be money
Yeah, I
supply.
mean, people use their debit card to tap around and pay for stuff the whole time, right? We
Yeah.
should include that in the money supply. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, what about people's savings accounts as opposed to their current accounts?
Should be included as well.
Should be included as well?
Mhm.
Okay, what about people's sometimes you put money in a 5-year savings account where you can't take it out for 5 years, but then you get a higher rate of interest. Does that count?
In the short run, no. In the long run, yeah.
Okay, well, if we just want to number the amount of money in the economy, should we include it? Yes or no?
You should include that amount that they put in. Well, in the economy at a certain moment, no, because they can't really take it out.
Okay.
So it's like the
So
supply's not there.
okay, so do you see why answering the money supply question is not positive? It becomes a bit normative, doesn't it? What exactly do you include and what don't you include?
Yeah.
So we have different types of money supply, and we have M1, M2, M3. Have you heard of these?
No, I've not. No.
Okay, these are different types of money supply, and basically they look at money in different ways. So M1 is the strictest, is the physical money supply. So this is cash and coins and checks, things like that. Okay, so it's like physical money, and it's the most liquid. Okay, what do I mean by liquid?
It can be easily converted into cash. So like I don't know, like gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas compared to like a property, it's much longer.
Yeah, it can be easily spent immediately, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, so like property takes longer. So you can transfer it easily between different people. So M2 is all of that near money, but also includes savings accounts and money mutual funds and time deposits, which are slightly less liquid. Okay. So
Yeah.
when it's locked away for a year or two, that's included in M2. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you get to M3, then you're also including things like stocks and bonds and sort of even less liquid forms of money. Okay.
Okay.
And yeah, these are the different types of money supply. So when we're looking at money supply, there's always a level of normativity to it in terms of which one we're going to use to define the total money supply. And it gets obviously harder and harder to measure as you get to a higher level of M. Cool. So that's money supply. V is quite an interesting term, which Milton Friedman came up here. Velocity of circulation of money. Okay, guess what that means?
Pardon?
Guess what the velocity of circulation of money might be about?
Like how quickly people are spending and like receiving money.
Yeah.
How quickly the money circulates in an economy.
Yeah, exactly. So
like the transactions, like how fast transactions are happening.
Not how fast the transaction happens, or almost. It's basically if you watch a £5 note over the course of a year, how many times does it change hands? How many times is it used to buy or sell something? Okay.
How would they track that in the economy?
It's really, really hard to measure empirically. But it's becoming a bit easier now that we have all this data coming from bank accounts and card payments. Because now you can kind of see how quickly is money moving around the economy. Yep. And if it's sloshing around really fast, that's usually the sign of a healthy economy where there's lots of trade, lots of spending, that kind of thing. If people just saving their money, locking it up away in safes and stuff, not spending it, there's not much circulation, then that's going to be bad for the economy. Okay?
Yep.
And then we have P, which is just nice and boring. It's the average price level in the economy. And we have Y, is total production in the economy. Okay.
Okay.
The amount produced.
Wouldn't they mean production like the output of the economy?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So total output, how much was made over a year's time. So these are all, the average price level is at an instant moment. Total production in the economy is, per year. Just to make sure the units match. Units always have to match up, right? You do any physics?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, these units are fine. And Milton Friedman comes along and says, you know what? These are equal to each other. Why do you think they're equal to each other? Let's see.
So money supply, velocity, total production, price level.
Sorry. There you go. Why do you think they might be equal to each other?
Well, because production, price level. I don't know how to explain it, but the money supply times by the velocity. Is it multiplied by?
Yeah. Money supply times the velocity of circulation is equal to the average price level times.
Oh, it's like the amount of money circulating in the economy, and then the other one would be also the amount of money, because the average price level. So that would be the average price of all the goods produced. So that's the total production in the year.
Yep.
It makes
sense. See, it makes sense. So this is the total amount kind of produced and then sold, and this is the total amount spent, isn't it? And obviously these are going to equal each other. And this is quite a clever equation, because what it says is that basically if anything increases, then something on the other side is going to increase as well. So, and these two always have to be equal to each other. So Milton Friedman says, you know what, the velocity of circulation of money is relatively constant at a year-to-year level. Okay? It doesn't change that much. Sure, in December, we get a slightly higher velocity of circulation of money because of Christmas and more people spending. But you know what? That's every year. It's not like 2016 suddenly have higher velocity than 2017. Okay? And total production is pretty constant, pretty fixed as well. Like it grows at a rate of about 2% a year. And sometimes it's up a little bit, sometimes down a bit, but it's pretty constant. Okay? So it's really the price level and money supply that change a lot. So if we increase the money supply by any factor, let's say we double the money supply, then the price level is going to double as well. Okay? And that's like a really obvious truth, but it took some equations and stuff to really prove this, because what the thinking was before. Well, if we print more money, why would it lead to inflation? Why would it lead to shops increasing the price of a Mars bar? That's ridiculous, right? If we just print money here. So it took somebody actually sitting down and writing out an equation for why this is happening, and they call it the monetarist equation for inflation. To say, oh, okay, and that's why Zimbabwe has such high rates of inflation, because they're printing money, increasing the money supply massive amounts, and they're not increasing total production. The velocity of circulation isn't changing, so that's got to lead to a price in the an increase in the price level. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So, going back to our question, explain what is used as money and how increasing the quantity of money can cause prices to rise. What is used as money?
What is? What is used as money? So I'll just say something, a commodity or something that's been, that has that's generally accepted, as a medium of exchange when purchasing goods or services. Or could you say as settling debt? Is it settling the right word?
Settling debt. Yeah, that's the right.
And then for what acts that way would be bank deposits, and then normal cash.
Okay.
So that's that, and then
so
money.
We use notes, right?
Yeah.
And coins, and money on your debit card.
Yeah.
you have to be quite explicit about those things as well.
Okay.
So obviously, you want the high level explanation of it's a commodity which has a unit of exchange and all these kind of things.
Okay.
Sorry, unit of account, medium of exchange. But you also want to be quite explicit about the fact it's coins, banknotes, debit cards linked to bank accounts, that kind of thing as well. Okay.
Okay. And then
because there's arguments that what we use as money has changed over the last 2 years, right? We're now seeing some vendors accepting Bitcoin, and it's a bit of a fad. It's a bit of a last year thing, but has that changed what we use as money in the modern economy?
To a certain extent, yeah, it has, but not as much as kind of turned out to be.
Yeah, not as much as anticipated, right? It's probably going to take a little bit longer before we're all using cryptocurrencies as our exchange. Okay, and how an increase in the quantity of money can cause prices to rise. Either you can go along the nice and simple.
I want to increase aggregate expenditure by the I did the increase in supply, not the increase in demand.
What do you say, sir?
I said the increase in supply. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. And then I did also demand pull inflation.
Okay, what's that?
That's basically when consumers have more money, and they the best way I think of it is like an auction kind of a thing. Now they're willing to spend more, causing the prices to rise.
Yep. Is it just consumers? Could the government spending more cause demand pull inflation?
Yeah, it could.
Okay. So what
I just thought of couldn't the government become a consumer?
Have you looked at what are the components of aggregate demand?
The components of aggregate demand? Oh, that would be the consumers, the government, and other producers that use that certain good.
Firms,
and the exports, firms, and then the exports as well.
The net exports and investment is what we call firm spending, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're right, if any of these four factors any of these four components of aggregate demand increases, then we will see demand pull inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Be careful to not just talk about consumers, because this can easily come from government spending too much and stuff as well. Okay.
Okay.
What fraction of AD is made up of consumption?
Pardon? What fact? I'm sorry, I'm lost. What?
So we have total demand in the economy, aggregate demand. Some of it is consumption, some of it's government, whatever. What proportion do you think of total spending in the economy is consumption?
I honestly don't know. I'm going to guess like 20%.
So a fifth, you think?
Yeah, a fifth.
So which one do you think is the biggest then? So you think
the government?
Okay. So we're talking about the UK, right? So what do you think the government could be?
I don't know. I haven't been here long enough, so I'm just going to government about 40, 50.
Okay. What about net exports?
Then net exports.
Remember, it's net exports, so it's exports minus imports, right?
15%.
15. Okay, so you're saying we have a positive balance of payments?
Yeah, and then imports is 20.
Sorry, that's not imports, that's investment.
Oh, sorry, investment. Investment is 20. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Exports can't be. But can
okay.
It? Probably.
Firstly, we know that the UK has a negative balance of payments position. It has a deficit on the balance of payments.
Oh.
We import far more than we export. Not far more, okay? Basically, sorry?
Yeah, current, sorry.
So we import, what is it, about 445 billion. And we export about 430 are some figures. So all of this turns out that actually net exports is minus 1% of aggregate demand. Okay, because they cancel each other out to a large extent.
Mm-hmm.
Consumption, interestingly, is massive. So just people like you and I going around spending stuff, buying our food, buying our houses, all this kind of stuff. That is 61% of total spending in the economy. Okay.
Yeah.
And the government is much smaller than you thought, but it is bigger than investments. So the government's usually estimated to be around, I don't know, like 20 to 25%, something around that. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Which leaves around 17% for firm spending, investment. Okay. And these figures are quite useful because, again, if you're doing some evaluation on, demand for inflation, whatever, you could say that changes in consumption are far more important than changes in investment, for example.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, 45 to 50% government spending. I mean, the government obviously spends a lot of money on the NHS and public roads and stuff. That is very much dwarfed. Oh, not dwarfed. I mean, 2.5 times as big, though, the private sector.
Yeah.
Or the exchange that happens through there. But that's going to be very different in different economies, right? So, the US, which always goes on about being, the hallmark of free trade and little government intervention, actually has a much larger government component because the government spends so much on the military and is so involved with subsidies and tariffs and that kind of thing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's have a look at what the Marx scheme said might be a good answer.
We haven't finished though.
Oh, sorry. Is there more?
Oh wait, no, we did. You did draw the diagram. Sorry, I forgot about the diagram. So that's fine.
For an understanding of money in an economy for Marx, for understanding what is meant by money in terms of general acceptability, and debt medium exchange. Yep, we got all those. For explaining what acts as money in a modern economy: cash and bank deposits. If there's no reference to the bank deposits, maximum 2. An average modern method of bank transfer, example, checks, contactless payments, this kind of stuff using that's all near money. Yeah, so did you get that concept? I'm not sure if I made that clear. This concept of near money, that's M1. Okay.
Okay.
Near money is M1. For applications showing how an increase in money supply can cause increase in aggregate expenditure and demand pull inflation. Okay. Cool. Wonderful. Oh yeah, have you looked at? Sorry, I think where we started in another session might be worth doing a bit more. Having a look at it. We were looking at aggregate demand, weren't we? And we're looking at the different types of aggregate demand and aggregate supply. Okay, I'll just do it here quickly. Okay, have you heard of John Maynard Keynes?
Nope.
Okay, so I'm going to draw first the neoclassical ADAS curve. That's one you're probably used to. Can you label the curves for me, please? What is this straight line? Have you seen these curves before?
No, I can't recognize this right line. I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, okay. Okay, so yeah, so this one down here, what is, if we're talking in macro, this is aggregate demand.
Yeah.
And this one sloping up is aggregate supply, but short run aggregate supply. SRAS we call it. Do you know why it's short run aggregate supply?
Because and then that straight line would be long run aggregate supply.
Yep. What's the difference between short run and long run aggregate supply?
Short run, there's at least one factor of production that's fixed, usually land, yep. And then long run, everything is variable.
Okay. So if we look at a PPF, us being here, right, means that we have an output gap which is that large, right?
Yep. Agreed?
Yeah. And this is where we are in the short run. We're always going to be moving around, and then this will move out a bit, and then we're moving around, all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's always going to be an output gap. The long run aggregate supply is defined as how much we could supply if we used all of our factors of production. So basically, if there were no output gap, then we'd be out here. Okay. The long run aggregate supply is because in the long run we can perfectly mobile with our factors of production. We use all our labor, all our capital, all our land, and all our enterprise. Okay? And that puts us on the edge of our PPF. Happy? Okay. So how does the long run aggregate supply, how is that affected by price?
It's not affected by price. That's
Why
why.
not?
Because even if the price increases, you can't increase the supply, and
Yeah,
because you're using all your resources, even if it decreases, there's no point keeping it with you. If that kind of makes sense.
yeah, exactly. So we have this long run aggregate supply, and it's always going to be to the right of this crossing point, isn't it? Because there's always going to be some level of unemployment, usually. And we can call this LRAS. Okay?
Yep.
So how wide is the output gap?
Have
you heard this phrase, the output gap?
Not on like the left demand and supply, but I have on the right, the PPF.
Okay. So yeah, in macro, yeah, if the output gap is obviously, yeah, so what is the output gap on the right?
On the right would be that purple arrow line that you drew.
Yep, and what is it?
So that'll be distance between the PPF and then the point, and then over here it would probably be between the orange line and then the red line.
Yeah, exactly. So it's telling us.
Yeah.
It's telling us how much of our resources are just sitting around doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And this is going to give us some idea about unemployment as well, isn't it? Because that's a form of output gap. So there's a fall in AD. AD shifts right. What happens to the size of the output gap?
Pardon, AD shifts right. Okay.
Sorry, left. Sorry.
Left. Okay.
Left, sorry.
Then the output gap is increased. It go from the red to the red.
Yeah, so the output gap's increased, and that tells us that unemployment is going to increase as well, right? Which makes sense intuitively from that basis too. So this point down here, we call the YFE, so the output at full employment, and this we call, yeah, like just Y, the actual output and actual price level. Okay. Mm-hmm. And when we're doing macro, we always want price level up top, not price. Why?
Because there's a change in price in the long run, like inflation. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Honestly, I'm talking about the price. Why is it? Because it's not the price of any one good; it's the price level across the whole.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. The general increase in the price level. Yeah.
Yep. And why do you want real GDP, not just GDP?
Because it's been inflated. It's been adjusted for inflation, so it has. You don't want to show you don't like an increase in. There'll always be an increase in price level due to inflation.
Yeah, and you're adjusting for that, right? So you can actually get an idea about how the economy expands. Okay, and we call this a neoclassical model, propounded by a bunch of Austrian guys at the beginning of last century. One of the main theories behind this is this guy called F.A. Hayek. Ever heard of him?
No, I have not.
Okay, F.A. Hayek is basically a classic neoclassical economist. Came up with all this stuff and said this is what the market looks like. So then, if the neoclassical economist is closely related to monetarism. So it's that kind of school, it's that kind of thought. Which is why this graph works so nicely with our increase in money supply causing increase in AD causing higher prices. Yep. Okay. Happy with all of this?
Yep.
Now we come to another school of thought, okay? And this is Keynesian economics. That's probably not how you thought it would have been spelled with how I'm pronouncing it, but that's how you pronounce it, that's how you spell it. Keynesian economics. And this is John Maynard Keynes, who came up with this stuff. This is a Cambridge economist. This is in the early 30s and 40s. And he wrote this book called the General Theory of General Theory of, let me have a quick look if I can find it quickly. The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. And it was kind of, because who wrote the most famous general theory?
Pardon? I didn't hear you. Sorry, could you please repeat that?
Who wrote the most famous general theory? At the turn of the century, a physicist wrote the most famous the general theory of
relativity.
Yeah, general theory of relativity, propounded by Albert Einstein, sitting down basically explaining the whole of relativity. Well, John Maynard Keynes thought he could do the same thing, so he wrote the general theory of employment, interest, and money. And this was meant to kind of revolutionize the field as well. And it really did. So his main idea was that if AD falls, all you've got to do is increase G, and then everything will be all right. So after World War One, there was a big sort of slump, a big economic slump. They had the Great Recession in the US. Have you heard about this?
I have not, no, sorry.
Okay, yeah. So after World War One, there was the Great Recession in the US, and Belgium and France really struggled, and Germany was very poor because of all the reparations they had to pay after the First World War. And then there was a massive stock market burst in the US, causing massive amounts of unemployment, and there was a massive fall in the standard of living. So whenever you hear about people talk about the Great Recession, the 2007 Great Recession, they're making a hint at the Great Depression, which was in the 1920s and 30s. Sorry?
Yeah, sorry. That makes sense.
And the Great Depression was that period. So you see sort of photos from the time of, sort of 35% unemployment and massive queues for bread, that kind of stuff. And neoclassical economists said, this is all part of the boom and bust cycle, which I'm sure you've heard of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all part of the boom and bust cycle. What's going to happen is AD has fallen like this, so that's going to lead to lower prices. So then more people are going to buy stuff again, and then everything's going to be all right. But it really wasn't, and leaving it to the free market just really wasn't helping. So John Maynard Keynes took a look at it, and he said, what we need to do is we need to ramp up government spending. But the neoclassical economists said, wait a second, we've got huge amounts of debt. Our economy is really struggling, and now you want us to go borrow more money to spend? And then Keynes said, actually, yeah, that's exactly what we have to do. And I don't even care for what you're spending money on. All we have to do is boost AD. If we increase aggregate demand, then people will, if we increase aggregate demand, then companies will make more money, pay their employees more. If employees have more money, they'll spend more, and it'll just take us out of this bad cycle. Okay?
Yeah.
And yeah, so he had this whole idea. And so this has been repeated now since the 2008 recession. The UK government implemented austerity. Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so basically 2008, global financial pretty bad. Conservative government elected, and David Cameron's big sort of campaign was all about austerity. So austerity is, we have debt, the government has too much debt. So it's all about, even though the UK economy was in a recession, is to reduce government debt. So spend less on NHS and less police officers and less infrastructural products.
Mm-hmm.
Opposite thing, right? Economy, I think there was a book published called End This Depression Now, which is all about the ideas of Keynes. And they were taken to the extreme because they said the best way to end this depression would be if there were a mock alien invasion. Because if there were an alien invasion, then suddenly all armies in the world, all the governments would suddenly spend loads of money preparing themselves, building up weapons to try to fight this mock alien invasion. Spend loads of money back into gear, and everything would be fine. So Keynes was once asking in an interview, okay, so what you're basically saying is spend money on anything. And Keynes said, yes, that's the right thing to do. I don't even care if the government is paying half the population to dig hole, because even that kind of spending will still increase AD. Okay?
Yep.
And his curve looks like this. Aggregate demand curve. But he says that in the long run, we're all dead. So there is no long run, there is no short run. Aggregate supply curve, which looks like that. Have you seen that before?
Yep, with you.
Adarsh, have you seen this before?
Yeah, with you.
Okay, cool. And that's what do we describe this part of the how do we describe this part of the AS curve?
When it's price inelastic.
Yeah, price elastic.
Sorry, elastic. Yeah.
Yep. So can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You're breaking up.
Okay. How's the connection now?
Pardon? How is that?
How's the connection?
Connection is better now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did explaining about the Keynes stuff?
Yeah, I heard all that. That was fine.
Okay. And that's about that. Okay. Discuss the policy options available to a government faced with inflation and consider which is most likely to be effective.
Okay. You could have the contractionary fiscal policy or the contractionary monetary policy.
Okay. Very
or
good.
you could have supply side policies. So
What?
you could have a supply side policy.
Yep.
That would solve the problem of getting a cost push inflation, or you could that would solve cost push, or that could match the excess demand, so reducing the demand pull inflation.
Yep.
And then if you have contractionary fiscal, that means that you will have higher interest rates, which makes spending.
Interesting. What is fiscal policy?
Fiscal policy is not the money supply, it's the interest rates and like taxes. So usually taxes, isn't it? With taxes and things.
And government spending.
Yeah, and government spending. Okay. So
interest rates come under monetary policy.
Is money supply in the economy, and exchange rates as well, which I guess could kind of go hand in hand.
But also interest rates, they come under monetary policy.
Oh, okay. So fiscal policy, then they could change the taxes. So if they could increase the amount of tax on consumers, on the general public, that way they spend less, reducing demand pull inflation.
Very good.
Or they could decrease corporate tax, causing corporations to gain more profit and hope that they pass that lower price on and reduce cost push inflation.
Okay.
Or that they could use that increased profits to invest in better production methods, increasing supply, decreasing cost.
What do we call profits invested into lowering costs?
I don't know.
We call that dynamic efficiency.
Okay, dynamic efficiency. I have to remember that. Okay.
That is investment and D spending, research and development spending, to lower long and average cost. Okay?
Okay. So monetary policy, they could appreciate the exchange rate, making imports, I guess, less expensive. So then imports less expensive, then they probably, if they're importing raw materials, then the costs will decrease. So hopefully lower cost push inflation. Also, that would also satisfy the excess demand, reducing cost push inflation.
Yep.
I mean, sorry, demand pull inflation. And then money supply, well, rather than money supply, interest rates. So interest rates, high interest rate, people will save more rather than spending, reducing demand, reducing aggregate demand, reducing the demand pull inflation. And then for the governments, reduced government expenditure, but that's for fiscal. Reduced government expenditure, reduced aggregate demand, so lower demand pull inflation.
Okay. What about supply side?
Supply side would be such as provision of subsidies. So that would reduce the cost of production, which will hopefully reduce the cost of the product itself when being sold to consumers. Lower cost push inflation.
Yep.
You could have other things like lower corporation tax for dynamic efficiency. Yeah, that's all I can think in terms of policies. And then
How as an essay?
pardon? How?
How would you approach this question if you're writing them as an essay? Would you go through all of these points?
I would write in pencil on like a blank thing, kind of briefly quickly write what I have, and then choose my best points, and then write those.
Your top 3 kind of points?
Yeah. Well, I would write top 4 or 5 just because I still haven't got the exam techniques sorted out properly. So I'd write 4. So that because I'd get about 8 marks, so then hopefully 2 for each.
Yeah. And it's really good if you can get at least 1 from each of these 3 different types of policy, right?
Yep.
And drawing lots of diagrams to show AD and SRS shifting left and right, all that kind of stuff. Good. So what do you think would be the most? Do some eval now. Evaluate, for example, higher interest rates.
This is more immediate, I would say.
How long does it take?
In terms of high interest rates?
Yeah.
Very little time, I would presume. Well, compared to
the Bank of England estimates that changes in interest rate take 18 months. That's the time lag.
Wow.
A year and a half. Okay.
Then it's very long. Okay.
Because
it's not as effective.
Because I mean that's quicker than some things, right? But how does interest rates work? Well, it's just the interest rate at which the central bank lends to high street banks. So it takes a lot of time for that to filter through into actually affecting consumers, because mortgages are generally, at a fixed interest rate or like inflation plus something. Savings account aren't going to jump up that much that quickly. So it takes a while for this to have an effect on the economy. Okay.
Yeah.
What other eval could you do?
And I'd do so for that specific thing. Then say tax rates. Then it could cause a problem of interest rates. Then it's how do I put it? It's also beneficial because it would strengthen our exchange rate. So you could have it will cause like a domino effect. So it would take down 2 points, if that makes sense, because high interest rates, then more people want to invest in that country, like save in that country.
Yep.
So then rather than having them to, let's say, sell gold to buy more to artificially stimulate the exchange rate, it's already happening because of the high interest rates.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I don't really know what you could have as a downside other than the fact that it takes long compared to others.
Yeah. Basically, you want to reduce inflation. What's the best way to reduce inflation? Is it better to increase supply or reduce aggregate demand?
I would say increase supply, because then GDP increases.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, inflation's too high. Oh, let's do contractionary policy, which means that people are less wealthy, higher unemployment, lower levels of standard of living. Like, that's not the best way to tackle inflation, right?
Yep, that's not the best way.
But yeah, interest rates will work, but do you really want to slow down the entire economy because of high inflation? Probably not. So that's why a lot of people say that supply side policies are much better. What kind of supply side policies? Do some eval for your supply side stuff.
Okay, so supply side policies, provision of subsidies, I would say good because that's immediate.
Okay, yeah, very immediate.
But downside is opportunity cost. So, and that's like higher government expenditure. But then on the other side as well.
No, follow
sorry,
this evaluation through further. Are we talking about solar panels here?
Pardon?
Are we talking about solar panels?
I'm sorry, I'm lost. I don't know where solar panels came into this.
Okay, right. So you can do a subsidy on the price of solar panels.
Yep.
Can you subsidize the entire economy to reduce inflation?
You can't. Okay. So
that's not realistic, right?
Yeah. So that's
so I don't even know how subsidy.
Yeah.
I mean, you could subsidize a few very important things like petrol, for example. But that's going to be really expensive, right?
Then maybe like general education, like an increase in the expenditure on education, but that's a longer term effect.
How would that work?
So then you would have better labor, and you'd have a better labor force in the future. Better labor force in the future, then they're more productive if they're better educated.
Yeah.
But then you could say that if they spend on education, then that will also increase aggregate demand in the short run.
Yeah.
So
it could cause some extra inflation in the short run.
Yeah, but it will drastically improve the employment, economy in the long run.
Yeah. You're likely to see that LRAS curve shifting to the like that. And then you have that lower levels of prices there, aren't you? Okay. So what do you think is the best then?
Best would be, I would say, the supply side policy.
Okay.
Of the education, because once you improve expenditure in education, then you can't really. Once you've like built a school and it's running, you don't need to put more money into it, or at least as much.
Yeah. How long is it going to take?
It's going to take very long, but in the longer run, that would be a better alternative. But then in the short run, the interest rate might be a good alternative.
Exactly. So a really good essay,
concluding comment.
Yeah. Okay. So a really good essay would be to say in the short run, we're going to be investing in education so that in the long run, our economy grows. Okay.
Yep.
And you can do that because it's not saying like choose one and disregard all other policies. It's saying discuss the options available and consider like which is most likely to be effective and what's the best way to deal with it. And if you've done all your eval, you've said this takes longer, this takes quicker, this is going to affect that. And then you end with something like saying a mixture of two different policies combined together to minimize the bad things and maximize the benefits. That's going to be a really strong answer. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a look what the mark scheme says. So range of contractually, fiscal, monetary, reduce aggregate demands, positive solvable cost push inflation. So support for the exchange rate, appreciating that. Yep. Explain the policy design solve. Explanation of any policy design solve inflation. 4 marks. So you can do 2 or 3 of those. Then you'll definitely get those 8 marks. And then eval comment. Consideration of the strengths of each policy, whether the policy is appropriate given the type of inflation, and a concluding comment on which policy is more likely to be essential. 4 marks.
So I'd have to put like a positive and negative for each one, right?
Yeah, that good evaluation is doing a positive and negative for each one. And then not just this is a theoretical positive and negative. It's applying it to the actual question. So subsidies are great, but we're talking about the entire economy, the entire price level. Okay. Yeah, wonderful. And then that's how you get those 12 marks. I feel like you're in a good place at the moment to be pumping out quite good essays, because it sounds like you're very structured and you're thinking about it in the way you're writing your essays. And you've got all the eval up there, like you know all the evaluation, you know all the theory. So just lots and lots of practice, and seeing all the different types of questions that come up, because they're kind of all the same, especially this section 1 questions. And yeah, I mean that's also why it's so important to go through the mark scheme and see the wording they're using. Like you have to use the word deficit. That's not just going to be the case in this mark scheme. That's going to be the case in all mark schemes. So it's really learning the language of examiners, isn't it?
Yeah, like the main things. That's kind of why I've been not really working on structured as much as multiple choice.
Yeah.
Because multiple choice, it's more like if you understand how it works, then it's enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
multiple choice is the best way to learn the theory, but this is the best way to learn the eval and
the benefits and the negatives.
Yeah, exactly. No, but you think about things in a really interesting manner. I'd say one thing is try to go for the more obvious eval rather than the more contrived ones.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because if you're a tired examiner reading 55 scripts, it's interesting if you have to follow someone's logic, which they're a bit different. But I just want to give you marks if you say the right things, right? So if it's something I've read before and I know works, it's gonna be easier for me to give that a mark, right?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for the session. Do you have any questions about anything?
Not really. I just wanted to know if there's any specific area I have to work on, and if you think I'll be kind of ready, I guess, for the exams, or if I should really work much harder than I am right now.
Let's have a think. No, I think you're coming along very nice. You're sitting them in what, like 7-8 weeks? What do you have?
Yeah, 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Okay. Make sure that you've read all the examiner's reports as well, not just the mark schemes. Have you found them?
Yeah, I have access to them.
Okay, very good. Because it's economics is all jargon, right? All these obfuscating words which make it difficult for other people, for normal people who don't study, to understand.
Yeah.
Because that's how economists kind of exercise their monopoly. That's why economists are paid so much in banks or policy or wherever they work, because they can use this language and that shuts people up, and then people don't understand them, and it's all a bit like, wow, what's this person talking about, aggregate demand and how it's affected by fiscal policy. It's words that people don't use in normal language. So if you can use them, that puts you in a really good position. And it's exactly the same idea with examiners' reports. If you sound like the examiners and you talk like them and you're using all the words which they recognize and see every day in their examining mark schemes, then you're just going to come off as a really strong candidate. So yeah, read those. I think your knowledge is pretty well-rounded. Just keep thinking of evals and making them specific to whatever you're talking about. Okay, and examples as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Robin. Have a good day.